last week we launched our Christmas series. We've titled it Shine This Christmas. And over the next few weeks leading up to Christmas, we want to go through the words of Advent and talk about shining joy, shining love, shining peace, shining hope, shining faith. Today I want to start with shine joy. This is at the root of the Christmas story, isn't it? But when we talk about shining people, being people of joy, all of us know people who are joy challenged, who don't shine joy. It's quite the opposite. They're joy challenged. In fact, it's such a problem that famous authors have written books about this problem. In fact, there's a child psychologist who wrote a children's book to help remind children as well as parents that a bad attitude at Christmas can ruin everything. The psychologist's name is Dr. Seuss. Maybe you've heard of him. He's written a book titled How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And here's how the book opens. This is the first paragraph. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be that his head wasn't screwed on quite right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. Isn't that true? Don't you know people like that, like the Grinch, joy-challenged people who suck the joy out of Christmas, suck the joy out of life. They suck the joy out of you. And every once in a while, I'll be honest with you, it's not very often, like every 2 or 3 years, those kinds of people, they find their way to church, even to the Grove. I know that only because a couple of years ago, I got a text from a person, and it was after church. And I was heading to my car. It was like 12:30. And after church, when you get a text from your friends, pastors, when you get a text, you hope, usually your friends text you things like, preach it, brother, or have a blessed Sunday, or great sermon, something like that, something positive and encouraging. Instead, this text was different. It started with a JPEG, and I looked at it. It was a picture of a weed against a building. And then this person wrote, Palmer, someone on your staff is not doing their job. There's a weed growing next to the classroom building. Weeds lead to termites, and termites destroy buildings. I was like, Merry Christmas to you too. You know, it was a December morning when he said that. There are some people that go through life like that. I think his heart was 2 sizes too small. The thing with as we talk about joy at Christmas is I want to remind you that even in this year 2020, when you maybe feel like your joy has been stolen, you feel like someone has taken it away, there's been so many struggles, so many hard times, so many regulations, so many things you can and you cannot do. Maybe you have lost your joy this Christmas. And today I hope to show you ways that the Bible invites us to rediscover joy as we look at the birth of Jesus Christ. I think for all of us, we can go through our days and our weeks and forget that joy is central to who God is. When you read the Christmas story, especially in Luke, you can't miss that with every character, there are statements of joy. And if you think about it with me, joy was God's idea. God is the inventor of joy. I think we could say he's the happiest person in the universe because it was his idea. And then he sends his son to be this bringer, this giver of joy to us and to this world. I think we can miss that. I think even people who go to church can miss that Jesus, when he was on earth, was a person of joy. I think we hear so many sermons about the sorrow and the sufferings of Jesus that we can miss that he was a person of joy. Even the paintings that have been painted over the centuries often only show his suffering and his sorrows, which are true, but they miss the gospel story that Jesus was a person of joy. He was always infusing joy into his relationships and friendships. In fact, the writer of Luke, in Luke chapter 7, verse 34, in the Phillips translation, we read, the Son of Man came enjoying life. He didn't come as a cosmic killjoy. He didn't come to steal everyone's joy. He came eating and drinking and enjoying life. So this Christmas, I hope to show you that one of your core purposes, one of the core reasons for your being is for you to be a person of joy. So how do we rediscover joy? How do we put it back in our lives this Christmas if it's missing or if it's lacking? So I want to share with you 3 challenges, and the first one is this Christmas to rediscover the joy of family. I think family we can take for granted as one of our God-given gifts, sons and daughters. Mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters are God's means of breathing joy into our lives, but we can miss it. So open to Luke chapter 1, and we open with a family story and joy. So I'm going to start at verse 39. What's happened here so far is an angel has told Mary she's going to have the Messiah. So what is the first thing that Mary does? The very first thing that Mary does is she takes off to find her family. That's exactly what she does. And she finds her cousin, a family member, her cousin Elizabeth, who is also expecting a baby. And we'll start in verse 39. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice, she, Elizabeth, exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy." So this is little tiny John the Baptist, by the way, Elizabeth's baby, has leaped for joy. Verse 46, now Mary says, "My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has been mindful of my humble state." So Mary says, "My spirit is rejoicing with you. From now on, all generations will call me blessed." So what happens is these 2 cousins, these 2 family members come together. They start to spread joy and share joy in the lives of each other. Studies have shown that happy people, content people, people who are filled with joy always, practically always, have close, strong relationships with people in their family. Whether it's a husband and a wife or a son and a daughter, with your mother and your father, that matters. There's a British social scientist by the name of Dr. Donald Winnicott, and he writes about the circle of connectedness, and he's coined this phrase, the circle of connectedness, and he's done studies on children and their parents. And he did one extensive study on children who play and the proximity they are to their mothers in this study. So he looked at like playgrounds, backyards, classrooms where you have several mothers and kids playing. And he found that the kids who played closest in proximity to their mothers, they took more risk. They were more daring. Instead of hanging from the monkey bars, they climbed on top of them and did parkour, things like that. They laughed more. They were more creative. The children who were playing further away from their mothers, they were less creative. They were less daring. They laughed less. But the kids who were close to their mothers, they showed more bravery, more boldness. They were more outgoing. They were more creative. And I don't think this is just true for children. This is true for adults. I think we thrive. We long for family. And so family, I want to remind you that the joy that maybe is missing in your life is because maybe you've been taking your family for granted this Christmas. I think as you read the Bible, you see that family members are a gift from God. So don't take them for granted. Family understand us like no one else in life does. In my book, God Can't Sleep, I share a Christmas story. And I write about a young woman who shares her story. And her name is Harriet Lerner. And Harriet says that when she was 10 years old, all she wanted for Christmas was the bicycle. It wasn't a big request. That's all she wanted. Christmas morning, she got up very excited, and she had a 12-year-old sister just 2 years older than her, and they ran downstairs. But when Harriet got downstairs, there were only 2 presents, small presents under the tree. So she and her sister opened the presents. And she knew it had been a hard year. Her father had lost his job. Her mother didn't have a job at the time. It probably felt a lot like 2020. And so when she opened the present, she saw it was a black tissue box. And both sisters got the same thing. That's all. When she realized all she was getting for Christmas was a black tissue box with these crude hand paintings of flowers around it, she said tears started to well up in her eyes. And when her sister saw that she was about to cry, her sister, 12-year-old sister, said, "Harriet, hang on. do you know these are very special tissue boxes? And Harriet says, what do you mean? She says, these boxes were painted by trained monkeys. And Harriet says, no way. Her sister says, yes, I've read about them. That's what happened. So Harriet, at 10 years old, she believes this. And she said, all of a sudden, I started to see these tissue boxes with these crude roses painted on them with new eyes. And I started to actually treasure the black tissue boxes. And I started to like them. In fact, she said, I kept them in my room as a prized possession. Whenever friends came over the years, I would say, these black tissue boxes were painted by trained monkeys. She said, when I got into high school, kids looked at me very strangely when I said this. But I was convinced that's what happened. She said, until she was leaving for college. She had turned 18 and she was packing to leave for college. And so she was going through her sister's closet looking for some textbooks. And she came across a term paper that her sister had written as a high schooler about that Christmas years before. And the paper was titled, The Black Tissue Boxes. And she started to read, and their stories were the same until she got to the trained monkeys. And her sister, Harriet's sister, writes that she writes, I made up the story about trained monkeys. I concocted it because I wanted my sister to be happy that Christmas. I didn't want my sister to be disappointed. She says that then after they opened those two boxes, she ran upstairs and her sister put her head in her pillow and cried. And Harriet says this. Harriet said that I realized then that my sister wanted to take the pain and the weight and the disappointment of a very bad Christmas for me so that I could have joy. She did all that so that I could experience joy that Christmas. You see how family, they understand us better than anyone else. Family will make sacrifices for you like no one else. And so I want to remind you that this Christmas, God has given you your family as a source of joy. Maybe you've been taking them for granted. Maybe you haven't been making the time for them like you should. Can I say slow down and start to spend more time with them. Start to invest more in your family. And maybe in your family there is conflict that is unresolved. Maybe it's with a brother or a sister, an uncle or an aunt, a parent, a grandparent. This Christmas, can I invite you to be the person that starts to bring healing in your family, because family is a gift. All right, here's a second challenge that I want to give you this Christmas, and it's this: to rediscover the joy of life-giving friends. You see, in life, I think there are some friends who breathe spiritual, good, godly life into our lives, and they fill us with joy. I think they are a source of joy. So if you need joy this Christmas, rediscover the value of life-giving friends. So let's continue our text. Turn over one page to Luke chapter 2. Now, these are brand new friends that I'm going to read about. They're the shepherds. So here we go. Verse 8, there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy. Underline that, for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. Move down in your Bibles. The shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord told us about. So they hurried off and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in a manger. So we have this young couple who's broke, poor, homeless. No one's taking them in. And then these shepherds hear that this is a moment that needs to be celebrated. So these brand new friends show up and they start to celebrate with them. The shepherds come to share joy. I think friends, good, godly friends, do that for us. I think in life maybe there's two kinds of friends. We all have friends like this. We have life-giving friends, and then we have life-sucking friends. Do you have those kinds of friends? They've never brought any joy into your life, but they remain a friend. When I lived in Chicago, I had a friend like this. I'd known this guy since high school, and so we ended up in the same town, and so I was trying to keep the friendship going and would play sports together and things. He was a good athlete. And then every once in a while, I would call and say, hey, do you want to come over for dinner tonight? He was single. I was married. I said, Veronica's cooking. And he always, whenever I invited him over for dinner, he'd ask the same question. what is she making? And I would say, well, how does that matter? What difference? Just come over. We're going to hang out. No, I need to know what she's making, because maybe I won't eat it. And half the time he'd say, no, I don't eat lasagna, or, I don't eat a roast beef. Something, strangest things that he wouldn't eat, and he wouldn't show up. I was teaching a Bible study at the time. I was a new pastor, still trying to figure things out. I remember I was teaching through Isaiah, and the study was on wisdom. And I did my best, but I knew it was a struggle. I knew that. You know that. And then as he's leaving, he stopped at the door that night. And he used to come to the Wednesday night Bible study. He stopped and he said, Palmer, so that was the worst Bible study that I've ever sat through. Some friends are like that. They just suck the life out of you. But some friends are life-giving, aren't you? Maybe it's a godly man or a godly woman, a godly person in your life. Those friends fill your life with joy, because I still have those kinds of friends in my life. Fortunately, one, he's moved out of state not long ago, but every time I saw him, he's planning the next adventure, the next thing we need to do. Let's plan. He'd call me and say, "Hey, we're hiking Camelback. It's June, but all right, it sounds fun with him. It sounds good. Let's go do it." And he is always planning things like that. One day he tells me, he says, "Hey, I need to have a baptism. I need to get my kids baptized." I go, "Oh, good. We're having a baptism soon at the Grove." And he goes, no, I need to do it in my neighborhood. I said, "Okay, we'll do it in your backyard, in your swimming pool in your backyard." He goes, no, I want to do it in the community pond. I was like, wait, why? I said, and here's the thing. I've been in Arizona long enough. I've seen your community ponds, all right? They're not made for swimming. There's nothing living. No living creature is in your neighborhood pond. They're like the black swamp of death. I've seen them. So I said, why do we need to do it in the pond? I'm trying to find a way out of this. I said, how about the swimming pool? He goes, oh, you got to understand, Palmer, we're going to invite the neighbors. This will be a witness to the whole neighborhood. And he makes it sound like it's going to be very fun and exciting. I show up, and sure enough, it's like the rest of your community ponds. It's black with algae, cement down there with slippery green things. You can't even see 2 inches down. I can just feel my feet moving around in this stuff. But it was a great day. Some friends make even the worst experiences the best experiences. Some friends are life-giving friends like that. When you look at the life of Christ, that's how his relationships worked. He was always going on adventures with his friends. He was always breathing joy and life into their lives. Like I said, he wasn't the cosmic killjoy. When Jesus was here, he was always planning luncheons at guys' houses. He'd say, hey, we're all coming over. He'd say, let's go mountain climbing. Or he would say, hey, it's a fishing day today. Or maybe we'll try water skiing or barefoot walking on water, things like that. He planned these elaborate upstairs fancy dinners. In fact, it doesn't sound like he ever missed anywhere in Galilee, he ever missed a wedding or a wedding party. I think he was so well known there, they put him in charge of the wine list we read, things like that. But Jesus shows us that more than anything else, that we are shaped by our friendships. Your friends, good godly friends, they have a way of bringing out the best version of you. If you're honest with yourself, there's a version of you that's not the best you. And the wrong kind of friends, they take you that direction. But life-giving friends bring out the best version of you, the most godly version of you. And if you've been in church for any length of time, you've heard the word fellowship and community a lot. They're very church words, aren't they? When I was growing up, every Presbyterian church down south that we went to, and I've been to hundreds of them, had a fellowship hall. Anyone else here grew up in a church with a fellowship hall? And where you had the Sunday night potluck. In fact, the first church I worked at in California, it had a fellowship hall, and they called it Joy Hall. How do you like that? Because when people came together, it was a place of joy. In fact, our wedding reception was in Joy Hall. But we were good Quakers, so we didn't have a wine list, unfortunately. But it was a place of joy. But if you see what I'm saying, that God gives us friendships as a gift, gives us life-giving friends. Friendships in many ways are like the air that we breathe. Well, some of us think we can survive without them, but we don't do well in isolation. In fact, most of the struggles, emotional struggles that people have in life, they come because of isolation. But God gives us the gift of friendships. I think close friendships that researchers are finding now are a better indicator of long life than anything else that you do. You can try to eat healthy, you can work out and exercise, but if you don't have close, meaningful friendships, you won't live a long life. Friendships matter, they say, more than eating well, more than exercising, but it's the depth and the breadth of your friendships that mean the most. This, by the way, is being lived out in real life in an island off the coast of Italy called Sardinia. Has anyone heard of Sardinia? In Sardinia, there are more people who live to be over 100 years old than anywhere else in the world. In fact, they outlive people in the U.S. living over 100 years by a factor of 10 to 1, 10 times as many people. And so a lot of researchers are going there and they're asking them the question, how in the world are you living so long? And they say, well, three things in Sardinia: walking, friendship, and tiramisu. Those three things, all right? In other words, get outside, get some exercise, get some sunshine, make lifelong, life-giving friends, and then enjoy life. Have some tiramisu. Have some of this God-given joy that Scripture keeps calling us to. So my encouragement this Christmas is to stop taking your friendships for granted, but you're going to have to invest in them. You're going to have to pour into them. Maybe you've lost touch with a good, godly friend. Maybe it's time for you to reignite that friendship so they can breathe life into your life. All right, here's the final challenge for joy challenge this Christmas. This Christmas, give joy away. There's an interesting paradox that I want to introduce you to. That if you want to have more joy in your life, it starts with you giving joy to somebody else. All right, so let's turn back in our Bibles a number of pages to Matthew chapter 2. We're going to cover the whole Christmas story today. Matthew 2, verse 9, we read about the wise men. The wise men are givers. They're bringers of joy. We'll pick up the story where they meet King Herod. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. So they're rejoicing because they have these gifts that they get to give away to someone else. Verse 11, and going into the house, they saw the child was with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and they worshiped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. So these wise men, are givers of joy. They come rejoicing because they get to give something away. It's kind of antithetical, isn't it? Because we think in our American culture, we think getting is the best thing at Christmas. But the Bible reminds us over and over. In fact, Jesus says this himself. He says it's better to give than to receive. The giver is the fortunate one. The giver is the blessed one. The giver is the one that often gets more joy than the person receiving. So do you get what I'm saying? The oxymoron is that if you want joy, you need to start giving more joy away. If you need joy, then give joy to somebody else. Let me share this illustration to help you remember this and see how it's lived out. So I'm going to mention the name of a football coach, and some of you are going to moan and groan because they're a division rival for us. But Coach Pete Carroll, who coaches the Seahawks, when you see him coaching, you can't miss that he's always smiling. He seems to be the happiest person on earth. I hope I get to meet him one day. So Pete Carroll has a family friend whose son, Jake Olson, when he was 12 years old, he lost his eyesight. He went blind. But Pete Carroll, because he knew the family, he kept inviting Jake to come to the Seahawk practices. And Jake somehow became friends with the long snapper on the Seahawks. And he teaches this kid how to long snap. And he keeps practicing long snapping all through high school. But doesn't play any football until he gets to college. So Jake Olson goes to USC. Jake is blind, but he finds the coach there, Coach Helton. And as a walk-on, he tries out and he makes the team as a walk-on. He's blind, but he's playing on a Division I football team. Well, Coach Helton has him play for 4 years. It's his senior year, but he's never put him in the game. He thought if I put him in the game, it's dangerous. I don't know if it's going to work. But it's his senior year. It's Jake's senior year, and it's one of the last games of the season. USC is playing Western Michigan. And so right toward the end of the game, USC scored a touchdown to go up by 2 touchdowns. So Coach Helton thinks, okay, this is the moment. If he's going to play, it's now. So he sends him in for the extra point. Now, Coach Helton from USC had also talked to the coach of Western Michigan ahead of the game and said he's going to try to put Jake in. And that coach had told the Western Michigan players. So Jake comes up to the line. He gives the snap. And the placeholder holds it. The kicker kicks it. It goes through the uprights. And it's the first long snap of any blind NCAA Division I player. And his players start to celebrate, everyone on the USC team. And then with the USC players, do you want to know who else starts celebrating? The Western Michigan players start celebrating. They're all lifting Jake up and down and celebrating. Wait, they just lost the game, but they're celebrating. How does this happen? The losers are celebrating, of the game are celebrating because they have given joy to somebody else. And think about that with me. Isn't that the miracle of joy? That at any time, of any day, you can duplicate what happened in that football game simply by giving joy to somebody else. We think joy comes from getting more and having more. We think joy is around the corner with the next possession, the next thing that I buy, or the next car that I own, or the next possession that I have, or the next promotion, or the next pay raise. Then I'll be happy. No. Social scientists are finding what the Bible has been telling us for centuries, that if you want more joy, the best way is to give it to someone else. So I have a joy challenge for you this Christmas. So if you have a handout, a bulletin, would you grab it and write down? Because I'm going to invite you to put this on your mirror, leave it on your desk, on your car dashboard, tape it to your rearview mirror in your car. I don't know if it's safe, but do that. And then the invitation is shine joy into the life of at least one person every day this Advent season. So maybe for you, it's to serve someone else. Maybe it's to go to a neighbor's house and repair something. Maybe it's to bring a coworker their favorite latte or their favorite burrito. Maybe it's helping your neighbor hang their Christmas lights, or maybe it's making Christmas cookies and sharing them with a friend or with a neighbor. Maybe it's just sending an encouraging text or telling your son or your daughter, you look fantastic today. You look like a rock star. Tell them that. Maybe it's just making time to spend with someone. But my challenge is to do this every day. Maybe you're in line at Chipotle and the person behind you looks like they've had a terrible, no good, very bad day. Well, then pay for their meal as well. I was at Zen Burger just 3 weeks ago. It was our Barefoot Sunday. And Veronica and I are there. And the server comes to take the bill or to bring us. We were done eating, and so I asked her for the bill, and she says, your meal is already covered. And I said, who in the world could have done that? She didn't want to tell us, but I knew there were 2 couples sitting there, and both couples were barefoot from our Barefoot Sunday, and their kids were barefoot. So I said, it has to be them. So I had to go say thank you because they didn't just pay for our lunch. We had guests from Mosaic in LA. They paid for lunch at Zen Burger for like 15 people. I felt terrible. Plus, I got a double chocolate milkshake, and that cost extra. But it made my Sunday, I'll tell you that. So we think, like I said, happiness and joy come from having more, getting things. I want to say no. Give joy away this Christmas. I want to remind you that joy is a choice that you make. It's not just a feeling. Joy is a choice. Every morning when you get out of bed, you have that choice to breathe joy into the lives of people around you, whether it's family or friends. But if you want more joy, like I said, then start giving it away, and God will fill your life with the joy that only Christ